Ole Miss's 2025 national title betting odds are better than you think.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Ole Miss Podcast, the most watched Ole Miss podcast out there. I'm your host, Steven Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media with Yahoo Sports and a former Ole Miss staff member. Today, we're diving into a wild reality that Ole Miss has to replace about 18 out of 22 starters, yet Vegas still has them at 25-1 odds to win the national championship, ranking 6th in the SEC and 11th overall. Why? Two reasons. Lane Kiffin has built a roster with lasting depth, so there's no snapping back to 6-6. And this year's college football landscape is completely wide open. There's not a dominant Georgia or Ohio State out there, meaning it is all about projections at this point, not just for Ole Miss, for everyone. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day. And a special shout out to the insiders and everydayers who make the show what it is. Don't forget to check out a second listen on the network, Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC or Corey Burton at Locked On Vandy. They have more insights on the SEC and college football as well. So we were looking around trying to find a topic to do a show about today because this is a weird couple of weeks set up for Ole Miss athletics, with Ole Miss clinching a women's tournament berth and a men's tournament berth already. Baseball is still in their non-conference with Jacksonville State, and the game against Sela on tonight has been canceled, but Murray State tomorrow. And there's just not a whole bunch going on for Ole Miss right now. So we're going to have to kind of scrape the bottom of the barrel to get ready for March Madness. So we were looking through about what could happen. What are the football stories? What's something interesting that people could like? And what we came to is Ole Miss is a 25-1 odds-on favorite to win the national championship this season. That's 2,500 is their betting odds right now. That translates roughly to 25-1. That's good enough for 11th in the entire country and good enough for 6th in the SEC at the moment. Now, there's some other teams that are popping up ahead of them, but Ole Miss has really good odds. And, you know, when you listen to the people surrounding the Ole Miss program, it's Ole Miss has to replace this. This is going to be problematic. What are we going to do on the offensive line or in the secondary? That is everything that's popped on. And people talking about that is fine, but the people that actually have a financial stake in what is going on is setting the betting odds at 25-1 right now for Ole Miss to win the national championship. That is interesting. And it's not just that. If you want to look at the SEC championship, Ole Miss drops down to 10-1 in the SEC to win the SEC championship this season. And it's interesting because when you look at everything that's going on, you wonder why that happens. Why is this going on? Because like I said earlier, Ole Miss is replacing about 18 out of 22 starters for 2025. Why would Ole Miss be up that high? And the answer is everybody has uncertainty. We're going to go over the next segment that is just absolutely astronomical. There's uncertainty in warts, and there's not a guaranteed team in 2025 like there was in 2024. In 2024, we knew that Ohio State was going to be good. We knew they were going to be dudes. We knew Ole Miss was going to be really good. And the NFL Combine has weighed out that way. We knew that Oregon was going to be good. We knew that other teams at the top were going to be pretty good. Notre Dame, even Penn State. Those teams were going to be an effective college football playoff representative because they all had returning quarterbacks. They all had a lot of depth on their team. You just kind of had a predictive nature about how these teams are going to be good. That doesn't exist in 2025. So you're dealing with projections on everybody. So this is a year to where covering a local team and seeing those warts is going to be a negative in college football. It's going to likely sound the same at Tennessee and Alabama and all of these uncertainties of people pointing out the warts and why they're not going to succeed. The question becomes, do you think that whatever team you're covering has a shot to make the playoffs, or do you not? That is going to be the question in 2025. And with Ole Miss having so many things that you're projecting on, and Ole Miss did not make the playoffs in 2024, it's going to be easy to see why people have the opinion that Ole Miss can't do it again. I hold nothing against them. They were trained. They went to college with it bleeds, it leads, with that mindset. So, of course, they're going to look for warts. Of course, they're going to look for reasons why they can't make the playoff. But the reality around college football, when you look around every team that is favored to go, is uncertainty and warts and unpredictability. This is a situation in 2025 to whatever prediction you make, there's a really good chance you're going to be wrong. It doesn't matter what that prediction is. Other than Mississippi State winning the national championship, that's a guaranteed wrong. But Mississippi State not winning the national championship, if you had that prediction, yeah, you're probably going to be good on that one. But for the most part of teams that are, odds maker favorited to exactly be in the conversation, it's interesting. Now, you look at Austin Simmons. Listen, at the NFL Combine, Austin Simmons got a shout out from Jackson Dart saying, yeah, I think that Ole Miss is just going to keep on going. Everything's going to be fine because this kid is special. He has elite arm talent. And that's what I've heard. I'm curious to see what Austin Simmons does throwing the football in the combine when he goes. Jackson Dart was 58 miles an hour. Joe Milton was 62. That's kind of where they end up in the arm strength capability. I want to see what Austin Simmons does. This is somebody with a mid-90s fastball from the left-handed side in baseball. He can really spin it. So we know that he has the talent and the potential to be really good. And remember, whenever you're dealing with 2025, it's all projections. You just don't know what's going to happen. And we're going to talk about that in the next segment. But what you know is Austin Simmons looked really good in the opportunities he got last season. Lane Kiffin, who notoriously for 2 years basically made Jackson Dart's life miserable with, hey, we're having a quarterback competition here. Hey, we brought in Spencer Sanders here. We did all that. There was no competition between him and Walker Howard. Everybody assumed Walker Howard. One of our sister podcasts that pop up in the Ole Miss sphere did a show in the middle of fall camp talking about how Walker Howard was obviously the guy. He is going to be the backup quarterback and all of that, even though that directly contradicted what I had been saying for several weeks in fall camp. And then, of course, when it turned out that he wasn't the backup, they changed their story around. But whenever you look at Austin Simmons, he is somebody that made it easy for Lane Kiffin to name him as a backup, not necessarily a starter. Jackson Dart was always going to be the guy. He was the best quarterback in the entire country last season, and the combine and the stats are proving that out right now. By the way, Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward, you didn't throw, and that means you have something to hide, and that is a red flag, just like it was for Arch Manning in the Elite 11. But I digress. Ole Miss has a really good chance to win the national title. They're almost a value pick at 25-1. You put $5 down on them, you have a chance to win a good bit of money. Ole Miss has a chance to be very, very good. The reports that are coming out of camp right now is Deshaun Stribling is a dude, an absolute dude. And no surprise that he is. He had nearly 1,000 receiving yards a year ago with Alan Bowman as a freaking quarterback. Trey Wallace, the other wide receiver, looking all right as well. He's another guy that led Penn State with Drew Aller as a quarterback. They've left bad quarterback situations and came to Ole Miss where they have a pretty good quarterback situation, even though there's not the game reps of a sure thing. Here's a little inside baseball with anybody that talks about sports, people, the opinion makers, the influencers, all of that stuff. A little inside baseball. Most of them have families. Most of them have time commitments outside of their job, which means they're not able to follow what that is without ruining their family, without ruining their marriages, being a bad father, all of that stuff. They just do not have the time to do it. Now, they're going to act like they're everywhere, and they're going to act absolute in their opinions, but they don't have that kind of time. That is the reason you end up with like, oh, Texas is going to be good, and Notre Dame is going to be good, and all of these blue bloods are going to be good because they don't have time to do the actual research. This is a year that those guys are going to be really wrong in 2025. I'm not exactly sure who's going to win the national title, but I would be willing to bet that like 10% of the people guessing who is going to win the national title actually gets that right. It's going to be interesting, and I will tell you why in just a second. You know, the uncertainty surrounding college football in 2025 is leading to some hilarious takes, including about Ole Miss, and why that is, I don't know, something that they might live to regret. So stick around to find out. So get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades Supply House. Whether you're into plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources, and the latest product information helps you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And the trade pros looking for that extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every single order. They have thousands of skilled professionals that are already taking advantage of Supply House. Now it is your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use the promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order. That is supplyhouse.com. So this is I'm talking about the uncertainty around college football in 2025. It is something that whenever people drop a definitive take about this Ole Miss team or about college football teams as a whole, whenever they try to sound like an expert, they're going to sound foolish in 2025. I'm going to do my thing, and everybody knows what to expect from me. But the people that's supposed to be really on top of things and have insider information are going to look foolish in 2025. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that everybody is going to have a new quarterback in 2025. The teams just below 100-1 on the national championship odds that are replacing their quarterback is at 15 out of 23 of those teams are replacing their quarterback. Ohio State, new quarterback. Texas, new quarterback. Oregon, new quarterback. Georgia, new quarterback. Notre Dame, new quarterback. Alabama, new quarterback. Ole Miss, new quarterback. Miami, new quarterback. Auburn, new quarterback. Louisville, new quarterback. Oklahoma, new quarterback. Indiana, new quarterback. Missouri, new quarterback. And FSU, new quarterback, which they would probably celebrate that as well. The teams that have a quarterback returning, and you might want to pay attention to this if you're looking for a value bet, Penn State and Drew Aller, which they're probably wishing they're getting a new quarterback this year. Tennessee in year 2 under Nico, who made the playoffs. Those are 2 returning quarterbacks that are playoff savvy going into it. Clemson, Cade Klubnik, another playoff quarterback that is returning. Garrett Nussmeier at LSU is returning as well. Marcel Reed at Texas A&M returning. They're 30-1 to win it. Lenore Sellers from South Carolina at 40-1. He's returning as well. This one's interesting because I didn't list them as a replacing a quarterback because DJ Lagway played a little bit last season. So I listed them as kind of a returning quarterback. But Florida's at 50-1. Auburn's replacing quarterback. SMU, they might need to replace a quarterback if we're going to be real about it. But those are the really big names of the top 100s that are keeping their quarterbacks and returning it next year. So if you want to, look at Florida or look at LSU or Clemson, I think Clemson has a chance to be pretty good next season as well. But whenever you look at all that, and Drew Aller coming back to Penn State, which they hired a defensive coordinator that kind of takes 2 years to get his stuff in. So that could be problematic with Penn State. But the uncertainty of this football season is going to be the real deal. Listen, all we know about Austin Simmons is this: 19-32, 282 yards, 2 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. That is all we know about Austin Simmons, other than the fact of everybody raving about him behind the scenes. NFL personnel's really liking the tools of a 6'5" quarterback with an absolute rifle arm. Had the best arm on the team a year ago. Austin Simmons is in position to take a major step. We like to lazily, and I will refer to it as lazily, compare him to Tua Tagovailoa. And that is because he wears number 13 and he's left-handed. Yes, that is the lazy reason for doing that. But Austin Simmons is nearly a 6'5" quarterback. He's a 4.5 40 quarterback and has a strong arm at a level that is Joe Milton as far as what he can do. And it just looks smooth coming out of his hands. He's a really good player and he has a lot going for him. But he's being replaced. The Ole Miss fans are thinking about the hype on Austin Simmons, so they're looking at the other side of this. We talked about people with 24/7 and On3 and Rivals and all the teams in the country looking at the warts of their own team, but they're also buying into the hype around their own team as well. And Austin Simmons has a ton of hype going into the 2025 season, and he should. Like Arch Manning, if you've watched probably more than 3 podcasts of mine, you know how I feel about Arch Manning. I'm not super high on Arch Manning. I think his decision to not throw at the Elite 11 and his decision not to camp and not to play in all-star games felt like he was hiding. That's what that felt like to me. Felt like he was trying to keep that from being seen by somebody. He's going to take over for Quinn Ewers, who was one of the better quarterbacks that Texas has had. He led them to 2 playoff berths in a row. But Quinn Ewers, according to the Texas fan base, was the problem, and now they have Arch Manning coming in. And the reality of it is, if Arch Manning had a different last name, everybody'd be worried that Texas would be an 8-4 type team, especially with road games at Ohio State, playing Oklahoma again, because Texas never wins consistently against Oklahoma. Road game at Georgia, road game at Florida. There's a lot of L's potentially on that schedule. And whenever you look at all the teams on this list, it's a similar type situation. If that quarterback doesn't hit, which we're not going to know until the lights come on, no matter if it's Austin Simmons, Arch Manning, or anybody, the lights coming on will be the next time that we know exactly how good that quarterback can be for that team. That is when you can start to get predictive with these teams. Right now, it is a crapshoot, and you have no idea how it's going to go. Ole Miss is getting the odds that they get because they have talented players and people are just projecting of what's going on. If Austin Simmons hits, they have a chance to be next level good. When you look at the wide receivers and the skill positions that they know they're going to have, they've added players like Patrick Kutas on the offensive line, maybe a Devin Harper in the interior offensive line as the season goes on. The front 7 for Ole Miss is going to be really salty. There's some questions on the back end of that defense, but not enough questions to where they're genuinely worried about Ole Miss really falling back to the pack. The fact that Ole Miss is a 25-1 and South Carolina is a 40-1 when South Carolina has Lenore Sellers and all of the hoopla that's been going on with him in the talking heads with ESPN and beyond tells you a lot about the overall talent of this Ole Miss football team, and they're going to be pretty good. Now, winning games and being pretty good are 2 different things. you're still going to have to take some steps. Lane Kiffin is going to have to take some steps calling the game. Analytics were completely 100% the reason why Ole Miss did not go to the playoffs a year ago. I will never not say that. Going down to Baton Rouge and going down to the Swamp and early on trying to run the ball for a first down on a fourth down, swinging the momentum to two places that are really hard to play against crowds that are juiced up, when Ole Miss could just kick a field goal and keep the crowd subdued. Ole Miss was better than LSU. Ole Miss was better in Florida. Ole Miss was better than Kentucky. But that's 3 games that Ole Miss let slip away. So I know that even projection-wise, whenever you're looking at talent, it could be problematic. But I do think that Lane can learn from last season. Last season was a pretty bitter pill to swallow for what could have been. This season could be a little bit more fun, but it could also be a little bit more straight-laced. I think Ole Miss is going to play like a favorite more in 2025. So we'll see how that looks for Ole Miss. Anyway, when we come back, coming up next, Ole Miss basketball takes on Tennessee Wednesday night. It's a game that is making us ask, what does it really take to face a team that could be a number 1 or number 2 seed in March? Stay tuned for the final segment breakdown. All right, we are back, and Ole Miss is taking on Tennessee tomorrow night. Remember, tonight's game in baseball against Southeastern Louisiana has been canceled due to the fear of inclement weather. So just remember that. I have not heard anything about the Murray State game on Wednesday night in baseball, so we'll pay attention to that. So we'll talk about that if we know the answer to it. But Wednesday night, Ole Miss takes on the Tennessee Volunteers. Tennessee hit a buzzer-beating shot against the Alabama Crimson Tide to win that game in Thompson-Boling Arena on Saturday. It was a weird game. Alabama kind of choked that game away to where at the end of the game, it just all kind of fell apart for them. That was weird. And Tennessee just took completely advantage of it because they're a good team, and good teams take advantage of situations like that. This is a game, though, that Ole Miss can win. It's going to need some help probably, but Ole Miss can win this game. And Ole Miss has the defense to affect what they need affecting. So it's going to be imperative for Ole Miss to play a very good defensive game and lock them down and kind of keep this in the rock fight territory. Now, if Tennessee comes out like they did against Texas A&M and they hit 9 of 11 3-point shots, Ole Miss is going to struggle in the game. That's just the way it is. But if it's a normal rock fight played on the road, to where the game is being kept close and you avoid scoring droughts that have been like an Achilles heel of the Ole Miss Rebels, Ole Miss has a chance to make some hay in this game. And if you want to look at after this fact, Ole Miss has a game against a number 2 seed and a number 1 seed. I have no idea which one is which because that is still subject to change with 2 more regular season games in the SEC tournament. But Ole Miss's tournament resume, they have 5 quad 1 wins, with 2 opportunities in the regular season heading into the SEC tournament. They're 5-9 currently in the quad 1. They did not have a quad 2 loss, 3 loss, 4 loss, no bad losses on their resume. They're currently 8th in the SEC on net. They are firmly in the NCAA tournament, and they will likely be wearing a white jersey on the first round game that they have. They are number 28 overall in the latest net rankings. 20-9 is their record overall, which, if I'm not mistaken, was the same record whenever Rob Evans took Ole Miss to the NCAA tournament like in 1996. That team, or the Keith Carter young guy team, their top win is on the road at Alabama, and their only bad loss is none. They have not a bad loss. Every win that they have, every loss that they have is moved into the quad 1. They have not lost a quad 2, 3, or 4 game. And because of that, bracketology is coming out. And with that win over Oklahoma, Ole Miss is likely clinched being the lower seed in the NCAA tournament second round. That means they're likely going to be wearing a white jersey in the second round game. So it's like they'd be the 8 seed against the 9 seed. They'd be the 7 against the 10, the 6th against the 11. That's what I'm talking about as far as what they can do. And Ole Miss has an interesting opportunity over the next week that is kind of interesting to think about. If Ole Miss loses against Tennessee and Florida, they're not going to drop. They're kind of where they are. I think Ole Miss has probably locked up a 7 seed or an 8 seed in the NCAA tournament. And they're currently projected by Joe Lunardi and Jerry Palm and all those guys at about a 7 or a 6 seed right now. With 2 games on the schedule that absolutely can't hurt you. Ole Miss loses both those games, doesn't matter. You lost those games. But if you win those games, it can help you. And let's look at Ole Miss as kind of being a 7 right now, a 7 seed. Let's say they beat Tennessee. I think that guarantees them probably a 6 seed in the NCAA tournament. If they get Florida and Tennessee, they're probably going to move up to a 5 seed line. And of course, you've got that bonus opportunity of the SEC tournament and a chance to right some wrongs of games that Ole Miss lost earlier in the season. Now, Ole Miss has the same problems that they've had over the last 3 games, but they also have the same attributes that they had before that whenever they completely blew out Kentucky and beat Alabama in Alabama. So understand, this is a flawed basketball team, but a team that can do a lot moving forward. I think this basketball team has a chance to make a run in March because of the way they can play defense. I think you're going to see a really intense team and it really pick up and surprise people once Ole Miss gets into a tournament background. The intensity is going to match. Ole Miss, after they beat South Carolina, when everybody told them they made the NCAA tournament, there was a natural letdown. There just was. Whenever you hear from the beginning of the year up until now that 8 SEC wins is required to get you into the NCAA tournament and you get that 80th SEC win, it is natural to excel. But Ole Miss has 9 wins now, and since they got that monkey off their back, Tennessee coming in with a chance to win that game, a 10th SEC game, there's only good things that can happen this week. If Ole Miss loses both games, so what? Doesn't matter at all. Some people are going to be upset about it. Some people are going to be performatively upset about it. But the reality of it is you want to be as healthy as you can be going into the NCAA tournament, and you need to handle things accordingly. And if that means this week shutting down a Matthew Morrell after the Tennessee game, because I'm sure he wants to play against Tennessee, don't play him against Florida, give him a week and a half rest going into the SEC tournament, you need to do that. If you have nicks, bumps, and bruises, I don't think you should play against the Florida Gators or travel to where the air travel goes up and down and the pressure happens. Everything from this moment forward is about the NCAA tournament. Anyway, weird thing, Wednesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern time, the same time that the Ole Miss Tennessee game tips off, I have a meeting with Amazon that day to find out exactly what's going on with their March Madness coverage and all of that stuff. I will obviously tell everybody what's going on once we have all of the deets on that, but it should be fun. But I think it's funny that I was like, hey, this thing by Amazon is really, wait, you can't leave Chaz Lanier open for a 3? Good for the Ole Miss brand. You know, that stuff is hilarious. I can't wait to see what happens as well. But we will see how it goes. Anyway, thank you for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your go-to source for Ole Miss sports. We pride ourselves offering the most comprehensive perspectives, which is why we're the #1 Ole Miss podcast out there. Your support means the world to us, and thank you for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On SEC podcast. Host Chris Gordy holds no punches, covering the best conference in college sports. Find Locked On SEC on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Hotty toddy, everyone, and remember, analytics is just the old English word that means bad football. We'll see you tomorrow.